So you started working with Bill Lawrence on Whiskey Cavalier. What made you two want to work together again, now on 3 projects?
Well, it's 4 actually. Funnily enough, there was another little one in the middle of the head of the class, which got 1 season. But it's I think it's finding people that I always have this chat with friends and even my kids about why do you work with the same people again? Why is it that I always hire the kind of same person to kind of play the flutes if I go and do the orchestra?
Right.
And it's because I know that they're going to deliver, and I like working with them, and I like them as a person, and I hope that Bill would say that about me, but I know that he's an incredibly easy person to work for. And what I notice about him is that he gives notes when he wants to give notes, and sometimes he'll just say, well, you know what you're doing, you've done it before, crack on, sort of thing. And he's prepared to let people also, I got you involved in this because I trust what you're doing, and do your thing, and I'll listen to it later. I might comment then, but I don't need to give my opinion at this moment. And sometimes he'll have a very strong opinion, sometimes not, but he's a very, very good people person. And on Whiskey, we just sort of clicked, and then head of the class came shortly after that, and then and Ted came along, and he just took me out we went to have breakfast in a sort of Mexican burrito van somewhere. I can't even remember where it was, somewhere in there. And he said, I got this thing and I want you to be involved. And, and that's how it started, really. And then Jason knew Marcus. And so we got put together for breakfast with Bill and a guy called Kip, who's a great friend of mine, Kip Kroger, who was also on those shows. And it sort of started from there, really.
Who knew that Jason Sudeikis in that Marcus Mumford video, which is like one of my favorite music videos of all time? Who knew that it would be up for us? So we have talked before. I was part of like that massive group of reporters talking to you in season 1.
Yeah.
And when we talked, you said that Ted Lasso was a different experience for you because the lockdown allowed you to have more time to collaborate with the rest of the production crew, and really like hone in on finding the show's sound. Do you find that you still have that kind of time 3 seasons in? And do you have time to check in with other people and be like, here's what I'm thinking?
Yes, but also, obviously when you start out in a first season on anything, you're trying to find the sound and the theme and, all the rest of it. Is within this, even though I might get a cue in and it could be a very long cue, I know what themes I'm going to use and I kind of know what it's going to sound like. So it's not that I then can just sit there and do it, but it's much easier. I'm less concerned about when I sit down about what I'm going to do. It's more I've got to do it and kind of make it sound good and get it right and hit certain moments. And so from that point of view, it's easier. But I still very much have a dialogue with a few people in the Zoom calls. Funnily enough, we've kept up still these big, when we spot things, we either meet in a room or we go on Zoom. But when we do, there's still 14 or 15 people. We've all decided we're just going to stay on. And everybody can chime in and have an opinion. And that's kind of nice, really. It sort of feels like a kind of big family, all kind of, getting involved and having an opinion, but not in an unhelpful way, if you know what I mean. I mean, people, it's more, say to Brent, who's doing the sound, like, I'm going to do something under this, why don't you go high? And he'll go low. Well, the other way around, or I'll do something there musically, don't worry about that, or, vice versa. So it is a very kind of collaborative thing. And it's kind of stayed true to the kind of, what we started in season 1, I think.
Did your approach to composing in season 3 change from what you did in season 1?
Well, a little bit, only in terms of the, really, I mean, as episode 6 came out on Wednesday and it's 62 minutes long, is it, or something? I can't remember what the length is.
Long, yeah.
Double what the episodes were in season 1. So I don't know, I'd have to go back and look, but season 1, you get a lot of short cues, and then theme, you're stating the main theme, and you're kind of you're doing probably a bit less musically in terms of the kind of scoring to picture. But in as you move through the show and the lengths have got longer and we've explored other character themes and their journeys and what have you, the score has had a bit of license to kind of be more dramatic on the storytelling, I suppose. And so I now have a lot longer cues to write than I did then. So I mean, it's not most of the, I mean, I'm still working on it. Amazing. I'm on the last episode at the moment, but you know, I've got 2 5-minute cues in the last episode. Well, probably that 2 5 minutes, 10 minutes is probably the total amount of music that I did in episode 2 with Marcus on season. So it's a slightly different thing now, but I still approach it in the same way, same sounds, a lot of the same instruments. And I don't know if you can see, I've got my studio here set up.
Yeah.
I have Ted Lasso drums.
Oh, wow.
Piano. And then you can't see behind this wall, but there's a bunch of guitar amps. I'm actually in the middle of still doing, but you can see where I've got it set up. But it's
I like that the walls, if I'm seeing it properly, the walls kind of look like Richmond a little bit, which is kind of cool.
That's it. Well, I've got in another room here, I've got actually the whole Richmond sort of banner and signs and scarves and things like that. But I've literally got it. That's the sort of setup that was on season 1. It's the same thing. Same guitars, same sounds, same piano sound, same drum sound. Not a massive kit, more like a cocktail kit. So some elements have stayed exactly the same.
You brought up season 3, episode 6, which just aired, Sunflowers. That episode sounds so different from any other Ted Lasso episode. And I was so tickled by it, especially the moment where like Ted kind of goes into his drug-induced, like learning about, you know, triangle defense kind of mode that like reminds me of, you know, a Disney ride almost. Can you talk to me about like why you wanted to make that episode so sonically different?
Yeah, I mean, you can't do this in an episode 2 or 3 of a first season, but you know, when you get going on something, you get a bit of license with the characters. And the Beard's Night Out episode in season 2 is similar to The Departure, and episode 6 to me is like a romantic comedy, really, based around Rebecca's character, you know, falling in love with you know, the guy on the boat and falling in the river, and Jamie and Roy on their bikes, and there's a bit of kind of Butch Cassidy type vibes. But the Ted scene in the, you know, with the triangles, it kind of is like there's a Donald Duck cartoon from like, I think it's from the 50s, and it's might even be earlier. I'd have to, but
it's okay. We won't hold it against you.
It reminds me of that. It's got a sort of and so the score, not only is it very, very old school orchestra, the way I even mixed it, and I put a bunch of on the strings, I had a load of tape, you know, like it had been run through a bunch of tapes to try and make it sound really like it was old. And so yeah, it was very much kind of like, this is a standalone thing. He steps out into it, and his chair goes backwards, doesn't it, into the we are in another place for 3 minutes, and this can be its own thing. And so I had a lot of fun with that, actually. It was really good, and a lot of, you know, all the references talking about Christianity, and then there's a choir sound, and then there's, you know, the sound of the kind of, you know, and there's electric guitars that do, or, you know, that mimic kind of various things. But it's it was a good fun cue to do, but it's a total departure from the norm.
The Ted Lasso theme is like one of the few theme songs that I don't skip. I love to sing along with it. And it's famously co-written and sung by Marcus Mumford of Mumford and Sons. You also worked on Shrinking with Brett Goldstein and Bill Lawrence, and you got the Death Cab for Cutie lead singer Ben Gibbard, obviously, to collab with you on Frightening Fishes, the theme song for that show. Both, I love those songs so much, and was obsessed with both of those bands in high school. So this is very cool to talk to you. How did Frightening Fishes come about?
Well, that came about because I mean, in the case of Ted Lasso, fun enough, the theme song was actually the first thing that we did.
Right.
Mainly because of COVID, we had no picture. So I flew from LA to the UK to go and stay with Marcus. I didn't know him that well, but I went there for like 10 days to hang out.
Yeah.
And day one, it's like, what are we going to do? Well, I don't know. Have you got a script? No. I've spoken to Jay, let's do a bit of, so we sat down and did that first. In the case of the shrinking one, it was more, I'd started putting some stuff together and I had some ideas. And then I actually did a kind of title sequence that was more instrumental. But when I then sent it in, we then were talking about how can we make this more exciting. I was like, well, what about a vocal? Because we did that on Ted and it worked really well. And then we were thinking, well, who would be the person to sing it? And I'd actually done vocals on the demo, but just background oohs and ahs, because I've got some of those going on in the show. And then we're sort of putting different singers' names around. And someone said, what about Def Can? I was like, oh my God, that would be perfect. And Bill has, an address book you dream about sort of thing. And he literally phone call. And the next thing I know, we're talking to Ben on a kind of conference call. Yeah. And would you ever be up for it? Yeah, yes. Okay. And then so I sent him some ideas and then he kind of fed back and we sort of went from there really, but he's fantastic. And the lyric is, I think, brilliant. And that he's that's all him, you know what I mean? He's just fantastic songwriter.
Yeah I'm excited. I have tickets to go see the big Death Cab Postal Service concert in September, so I'm excited to see him. I hope he sings it. He won't, but so for you also composed for Daisy Jones and the Six, which I know also Marcus collaborated a little bit as well. How is it different writing for a show that doesn't have to do with music to writing for a show that like music is so integral to the story?
Well, it is very different actually. And one of the things with Daisy that I did differently to how I would normally approach something is that the show is music heavy, right? I mean, it's all, there's probably, a lot of needle drops and a lot of original songs. So I knew that the score couldn't really, I didn't want it to be in the same sound world. So I immediately discarded the idea it was going to be drums and guitars and bass, and it wasn't going to be orchestra because that would just be too out of left. I decided I was going to go actually quite ambient, and a lot of the score is almost, to me, I tried to make it feel like it's sort of almost like a pause and a breath between songs. So there are moments where it has to build and there are little nuggets of melody for some of the characters, and there are moments where it has to tell a story dramatically. But in the main, I'm trying not to do too much, which actually is quite difficult. But make space between the songs so that when you then get there, you don't feel like you're, exhausted kind of mentally. Because I think we often have this thing when you're writing and you get sent a short clip and you can kind of write it and it feels, you think, well, that's done. And then you get the whole film and you watch it in context and it's just like, it doesn't work at all because it's too early on in the film, in the timeline, or the opposite later on, or what have you. And I think Daisy was one of those things where I needed I couldn't write things in isolation. I needed the whole episode to then work out how the music was going to sit,
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit different.
Sense. So it hasn't been confirmed officially that this is the last season of Ted Lasso. They keep playing with us. It was, now it's not. We're not sure. There could be spinoffs. And obviously, I'm not asking you to tell me anything. But if it is the last season and there are no other spinoffs, so I would love to see like a Trent Crimm, like investigative show. What do you hope the show's legacy will be, both sonically and then also just as a whole?
I think as a whole, I do think that it's, whether it's the last one or there are spin-offs, I do think it's important it's nice to end something when it does end on a kind of by choice rather than, you finish the season, you're teed up for the next one and then that's the end and you never get any closure. So I think that it was always imagined, whether it goes on or there are spin-offs, I don't know the answer to those, but it was always imagined this as a 3-season arc. And I remember talking to Jason the Dad and Darts queue in season 1. At the time doing that, he was like, this is going to be really important in the second season when Ted and Rebecca are talking about their fathers. And I was like, what? This guy's you know, how can you even be
Yeah.
kind of imagining that? And then of course we get around to episode 10 in season 2, and there's, you know, the cue comes back and it then changes and goes elsewhere, but he had a total outline of, you know, how it was looking. So I think that that makes it a sort of, you know, it's done its 3, it's a unique sort of thing, and a kind of, whether it goes on or not, it's a standalone story within, you know, the whole saga as a whole. And I hope that people sort of, you know, remember that obviously fondly, and the characters are also sort of lovable, and they've all had, you know, they've all had their kind of stories. And musically, I think, I hope that they, you know, the show had a kind of, I mean, when we started doing season 1, you know, Marcus and I were coming from quite different places, you know, and so I think that the score, you know, was different, and kind of had a bit more of a kind of band feel than maybe some of the other scores that were around at the time. And I think that the, you know, hopefully it will be remembered for strong melody and kind of like a sort of emotional kind of context, even within the kind of scenes that aren't like that. You know, the score, the music is all about the heart of the show, really, and I think that's what makes the show so great. You know, whether someone's struggling or not struggling, it's the heart within always, and wishing the best in people.
Right. Whenever I hear that American football theme like slowly come in, you definitely feel something. So, Tom, thank you so much for talking with me. I've had such a great time, and congratulations on everything happening in your life. You've got a lot of projects going on.
Thank you. Yeah, no, been a good. I still got to finish it, but I'm working on it.
You're working on it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.